At my husband's pastoral anniversary, widow Lenora Fields stepped to the microphone and prayed the one prayer Elias had promised would belong only to our marriage. A paper fan stopped halfway to Mother Bernice Tate's cheek. A youth usher lowered a tray of programs without setting it down. The choir director's tuning fork rolled from the piano ledge and struck the floor once. Lenora closed her eyes. Lord, make me safe for the woman who has had to be strong too long. Let me never use her tenderness to make myself important. My hearing narrowed until the sanctuary seemed lowered beneath water. Elias had written those words on the back of a communion card 26 years earlier, after I had spent 3 nights in the church prayer room caring for his mother. Near the altar, he had promised never to repeat that prayer for another woman because it named the husband he wanted to become. Now Lenora held a cream card with his handwriting along the edge. He told me this prayer was too sacred for the pulpit, she said. He said it was for the woman who understood him when ministry became lonely. Elias sat beneath a banner reading 30 years of faithful service. He looked at Lenora, then at the card, and finally at me. What I saw was calm arranged too carefully, as though he had practiced surviving this moment but had not expected it to arrive through a widow's trembling voice. 9 weeks before the anniversary, Greater Mercy Baptist Church was preparing to honor Elias for 30 years in the pulpit. I had served beside him for 27. I came to Greater Mercy after my father died, when my faith had become quieter than people knew how to accept. The church mothers did not demand a testimony. They gave me a key to the kitchen, placed me beside the biscuit dough, and let usefulness return before language did. That was where Elias noticed me. He was an associate minister who stayed after Bible study to stack chairs. He knew how to speak without crowding silence. I loved him first for that. After we married, the congregation called me First Lady. I coordinated the bereavement ministry, trained altar workers, and kept a calendar of death anniversaries because grief often returns after everyone else forgets the date. Elias preached publicly. I tended what followed people into the hallway after the benediction. I believed our work fit together like 2 hands around the same bowl. His voice gathered people. My attention kept them from becoming lost inside the gathering. My deepest desire was not admiration. I wanted to be known by the man who benefited most from how well I knew everyone else. But churches can praise a woman's discernment while never asking who is discerning her. The anniversary committee ordered gold cloths, a commemorative booklet, and a portrait for the pastor's hallway. People spoke of our marriage as proof that ministry could remain whole under pressure. I smiled for the photographs. I did not yet understand that a public image can become a room where a woman is expected to keep arranging flowers after the air has gone thin. Lenora joined Greater Mercy after her husband, Calvin, died. She was 62, soft-spoken, and known for bringing lemon pound cake to the ushers before sunrise services. She wore navy dresses and one silver bracelet that had belonged to her mother. I welcomed her into the widow's prayer circle. At first, she rarely spoke. 6 months later, Elias asked to offer private pastoral sessions for widows with complicated grief. The request sounded reasonable. I had spent years telling women that sorrow deserved more than a hurried prayer in a hallway. When Elias said some needed confidential space, I agreed. Confidential does not mean unaccountable, I told him. He smiled. You trained me well. Soon, the church secretary blocked Thursday evenings on his calendar. The office door stayed closed. Sometimes the final session ended after choir rehearsal. I noticed Lenora's car near the garden gate more than once. When I asked whether she was improving, Elias reminded me that pastoral confidence protected vulnerable people. He was correct in principle. That made it harder to recognize what he was doing in practice. Spiritual language can name what is holy. It can also make ordinary questions sound disrespectful when someone has something to hide. I did not want to become the jealous pastor's wife who treated every grieving woman as a threat, so I corrected my discomfort before I examined his conduct. What I called maturity was partly fear of being misread. What I called trust was beginning to require that I ignore my own eyes. The first fragment came from Deaconess Marcia Green. We were folding anniversary napkins in the fellowship hall when she asked whether pastoral counseling included handwritten prayers. Sometimes, I said. She pressed the crease too hard and tore the napkin. Marcia had seen 3 cream cards fall from Lenora's notebook. One was signed, "For the one who sees the man beneath the mantle." That phrase did not prove a physical affair. It proved an intimacy Elias had not named to me. Then other women brought pieces. Sister Yvonne Cole said Lenora often waited near the side hallway after choir rehearsal. Dana Whitfield, the church secretary, showed me the appointment calendar after I asked directly. Lenora's name appeared 11 times in 4 months. 6 sessions had no end time. Mother Bernice once entered the pastor's study to leave funeral programs and found Elias holding both of Lenora's hands. He stepped back when he saw me, she said. Not because prayer is shameful, because he knew how it looked. Camille Reed, one of our altar workers, had heard Lenora say Elias understood a loneliness no one else respected. Camille worried that Lenora sounded less healed than dependent. Each woman had doubted herself. Each feared harming the church. Each assumed someone older, wiser, or closer to leadership already knew. That is how a pattern survives inside an institution. Everyone holds one piece and believes the complete picture belongs to someone else. I asked the women to write down exactly what they had seen. Some truths need witnesses before they need a microphone. I requested a confidential meeting with Chairman Amos Bell and 2 senior trustees. We met in the conference room beside the sanctuary. I did not accuse Elias of physical adultery. I presented the appointment pattern, the private cards, and the concern that grief counseling had become emotionally exclusive. Chairman Bell leaned back. First Lady, do you have evidence of physical misconduct? No. Then we should not damage a man over kindness. I asked whether a pastor needed to become physical before the church recognized a boundary had been crossed. One trustee studied the table. The other said anniversary week was not the time to raise something that could be misunderstood. There it was, not denial. Timing. Institutions often call a woman's pain premature until a man has completed his celebration. I requested that Elias stop private sessions with Lenora until an outside review occurred. Chairman Bell said that might create rumors. Rumors grow where accountability is refused, I answered. He promised to speak with Elias after the anniversary. When I left, the pastor's office door was closed. I heard Elias speaking in a low, gentle voice. Then Lenora laughed once, a small sound that ended quickly. I did not open the door. My dignity did not require a dramatic entrance. It required that I stop allowing other people to decide what counted as enough information for me to act. That afternoon, I removed my name from the anniversary tribute. Mother Bernice found me crossing out the final paragraph. She brought a black folder and said, "Keep copies. Respectability has a poor memory when truth becomes expensive." 4 days before the anniversary, Lenora came to the bereavement room while I arranged chairs. "I think I have caused offense," she said. I told her I was not asking for a confession. She placed her notebook on the table but did not open it. "Pastor says some people cannot understand spiritual companionship." The phrase sounded practiced. I asked what it meant. "He listens without needing me to become cheerful. He says I see the man beneath the mantle." The exact words Marcia had remembered. "Did he tell you I knew about these conversations?" Lenora looked toward the door. "He said you understood ministry loneliness." That was not an answer. I asked whether he had written to her. Her hand covered the notebook. "Some prayers are private." I knew the card existed, but I did not reach across the table. A woman does not recover truth by violating another woman's hand. Privacy protects the person whose life is vulnerable, I said. Secrecy protects behavior that cannot bear light. Lenora asked whether Elias had described me as emotionally distant. I told her he had never said those words to me. Before leaving, she paused beneath the open sanctuary door. "I thought your silence meant permission." Her sentence hurt because I understood how she had reached it. My quiet had been explained by Elias, church leaders, and now Lenora as agreement. A woman can disappear without leaving a room when everyone else is allowed to interpret her silence. That evening, Lenora asked Dana to add her to the anniversary tribute. Dana told me, but did not remove her name. "I think she is deciding something," she said. So was I. I did not confront Elias before the anniversary. The truth was still assembling, and years around grief had taught me not to confuse speed with courage. I sat on the garden bench after rain and listened to water moving beyond the wall. My life had looked calm because I kept naming every overflow temporary. I asked myself what I had protected. Not Lenora, not the widow's ministry. I had protected the version of Elias I needed the church to keep believing. For years, I thought a ministry wife proved her strength by refusing to be suspicious. I now saw how easily that teaching could become a cage. A woman was expected to trust without access, forgive before clarity, and protect the institution from the consequences of what it refused to examine. Marcia copied her statement. Dana preserved the appointment calendar. Yvonne wrote down dates when Lenora remained after rehearsal. Mother Bernice sat beside me in the empty sanctuary and did not tell me what decision to make. She only said, "Whatever happens, do not let them make his reputation heavier than your reality." That was one of the kindest things anyone had ever offered me. Not advice, not pressure, a refusal to let me carry false proportions. On anniversary morning, white roses covered the altar. From the center aisle, they looked flawless. Up close, several petals had begun to brown. I wore deep blue. I sat in the first pew beside Mother Bernice, not in the chair prepared for me near the pulpit. Elias noticed. He continued smiling. After the choir sang, members offered tributes. A former deacon thanked Elias for visiting him after surgery. A young minister praised his guidance. The congregation stood twice. Then Dana announced Lenora Fields. Lenora approached the microphone holding the cream card. She prayed the words Elias had promised would belong only to our marriage. When she finished, she turned the card over. "Pastor Elias gave me this after our 7th private session," she said. "He told me this prayer once belonged to a season in his marriage, but some sacred things are meant to find the person who can receive them." A sound moved through the sanctuary, not quite a gasp and not quite speech. Lenora read the note beneath the prayer. "Until we are free to live honestly, let these words hold what we cannot say in public." The date was 6 weeks earlier. She looked at me. I believed First Lady knew. Yesterday I learned she did not. Then she faced the church. "I am responsible for accepting what should not have been offered, but I came for grief counsel, and I was given a private bond that depended on another woman's ignorance." Elias rose and called the note pastoral language taken out of context. Dana stood with the appointment calendar. Marcia stood with her written statement. Mother Bernice remained seated and placed her hand over mine. The truth did not arrive as one woman's accusation. It arrived through records, witnesses, repeated phrases, and Lenora's refusal to keep protecting what had wounded all of us. Elias looked toward Chairman Bell. The chairman did not move. For the first time in 30 years, the sanctuary did not rearrange itself around my husband's explanation. The anniversary ended early. No one presented the gold watch. The deacons asked Elias, Lenora, Dana, and me to remain in the prayer room. Mother Bernice and Marcia came as witnesses. Elias said he had never touched Lenora improperly. Lenora answered, "You taught me to measure betrayal only by what happened to my body. You knew what was happening to my dependents." I asked one question. "Why that prayer?" He said it came to mind during counseling. That prayer came from our marriage. He replied that spiritual language did not belong to one person. "The scripture does not belong to me," I said. "Your promise did." That distinction changed the room. He had taken a private covenant, removed my history from it, and offered it as proof of special intimacy to another woman. Elias admitted he waited for Lenora's sessions. He admitted discussing feeling unseen in our marriage. He had told her there might come a time when truth required him to choose a different life. He insisted he had never made a plan. Some betrayals are built from plans. Others are built from repeated permissions given to desire while everyone pretends nothing has happened. Chairman Bell asked why Lenora had not come forward sooner. I turned to him. That question belongs after we ask why her pastor created a relationship she was expected to hide. Psalm 51:6 says, "Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts." Truth in the inward parts is not merely confession after discovery. It is refusing to build comfort from another person's confusion. The church board met for 3 evenings with an outside Baptist ethics counselor. The review found no evidence of physical contact. It found spiritual exclusivity, misuse of pastoral authority, concealed emotional dependence, and repeated efforts to make Lenora believe our marriage was privately ending. Some board members preferred the phrase inappropriate attachment. Marcia said, "Use words that teach the next woman what to recognize." The final report named an abuse of pastoral boundaries and an emotional affair shaped by unequal authority. Elias was suspended from preaching and counseling for 12 months. He was required to enter therapy, complete clergy boundary training, and face formal review before any return to leadership. He was not allowed a farewell sermon. The congregation divided. Some said the church punished a man for caring too much. Others asked why women must wait for physical evidence before emotional exploitation counts. Greater Mercy did not collapse. It became uncomfortable. Those are not the same thing. For years, we treated discomfort as danger whenever truth challenged authority. But a church is not destroyed because people learn what happened. It is endangered when it protects the person who caused harm more carefully than the people who carried it. Elias asked me to sit beside him during the announcement. I declined. I will not help your consequence look like our agreement. This time, I did not study his face for remorse. My boundary did not need his expression to become valid. The women of greater mercy did more than comfort me. They changed the conditions that had allowed the harm. Mother Bernice sat through every board update and wrote down decisions so no one could later soften the record. Dana created a counseling log with start times, end times, open door options, and a second trained person on church property for evening sessions. Marcia brought meals and the name of a licensed therapist who understood clergy marriages. A casserole can carry you through Tuesday, she said. It cannot teach your body that questions are safe again. Yvonne rearranged choir rehearsal so I never crossed the dark parking lot alone during the first weeks. Camille replaced private handwritten prayer cards with resources reviewed by the care team. Lenora did not disappear. She asked whether her presence in the women's group would harm me. I told her I needed distance before closeness, but she did not need exile. That boundary protected both of us. When a member called Lenora a homewrecker in the hallway, Mother Bernice stepped between them. A home is not protected by blaming the woman who was counseled inside a lie. The women did not force Lenora and me into a public embrace. They allowed truth to be complete without demanding instant forgiveness. In counseling with Elias, I learned another distinction. Loneliness is a condition. Secrecy is a choice. I had called unusual tolerance the duty of a ministry wife. Now I understood that endurance becomes self-abandonment when it is used to avoid naming what must change. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence." A boundary is not revenge. Transparency is not a lack of faith. 6 months later, the bereavement ministry stopped centering the pastor as the final voice in every woman's grief. Trained facilitators led groups. Counseling referrals were posted openly. No one met repeatedly behind a closed door without oversight. The cream card remained in the ethics file. But the prayer needed a different ending. I gathered the women in the sanctuary one Saturday morning. Light moved across the altar. Purple irises had begun opening in the garden. Lenora sat near the back. I read the prayer once. Lord, make me safe for the woman who has had to be strong too long. Let me never use her tenderness to make myself important. Then I said, these words will not belong to secrecy again. We discussed what safety requires: consent, clarity, accountability, the freedom to ask who knows, and the right to leave any bond that depends on concealment. Lenora spoke near the end. I thought being understood meant I had found something sacred. I did not ask who had to remain uninformed for me to feel chosen. I answered, a bond that needs another woman's erasure is not sacred, no matter how softly it is named. 1 year after the anniversary, Greater Mercy honored the whole body instead of one man. Elias remained away from leadership. Our marriage remained separated, though not hostile. I no longer needed an immediate ending to prove I had recovered my dignity. Faith had not required me to protect a false appearance. Grace had not required Lenora to carry all the blame. Forgiveness did not require access before trust existed. Love did not become less Christian when it learned to use a boundary. Truth did not destroy the church. It taught the church how to become safer. And the prayer he never shared became the truth we would never hide again. This space exists for women whose sacred words, quiet labor, or generous hearts have been used without full honesty, and who are learning that dignity can speak without shouting. If this story touched something you have lived, share only what feels safe in the comments. Sometimes healing begins when one woman says, I thought silence meant permission, and another answers, it never did.